Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody back, Alabama Care. Today we have Mr. Dustin Chandler, and Mr. Chandler is a father and advocator. And at this point, I'd like to hand it back over. Mr. Chandler, if you would introduce yourself.
Yeah, Dustin Chandler. I'm a father of a 10-year-old child with developmental disabilities, Carly, and I'm a father also to two other great children, Colton and Courtney.
Now, are you originally from Alabama?
Originally from Alabama, right just south of Birmingham. I was born and raised here, been here my entire life. So it's I could never get away, so I'm still here.
And we always like to ask, is it Roll Tide or War Eagle?
Man, I'm a graduate of Auburn University, so it's a big War Eagle for me. So I know that's not popular in a lot of parts of Alabama, but here at my house we're War Eagle. We're big Auburn Tigers.
Awesome. And I'd like to give a little bit of history. Now, you are a police officer in the state of Alabama.
I'm a former cop. Yeah, I got out of police work. Golly, it's been a little bit now, but former police officer, did it roughly 7.5, 8 years total. That's was an interesting part of my life. Learned a lot about life and learned obviously a lot about law enforcement. But yeah, it was a interesting part. I always wanted to be a cop. Got to do that. God blessed me with the ability to do that, and that's kind of part of my story.
Now, was that more focused in like narcotics, or was it kind of more general?
No, I mean, police work, it's kind of in general, but I had a niche for the narcotics world. I was made a lot of narcotics arrests, and that's kind of where I found success on how to kind of look for that and try to go after those kind of guys and try to work the ladder up to get the bigger the dealers out there. And it's interesting, being a cop gives you a totally different perspective in life, really, and really shows you how the real world truly works out there. And that's something I'm very blessed to have that knowledge. And I will tell you, before you become a cop, you think everything is really one way because you kind of live in your bubble. And then, once you've been a cop or once you are one, you see that things don't quite work exactly how they worked in your bubble. So it was an interesting experience and one I'm glad I have.
I'm very thankful of your service, and I feel like kind of a lot of people should feel that way. We kind of live in a bubble where we don't see that kind of stuff, maybe on the news once or twice, but not on the daily. And I have a buddy. I play hockey a couple times a week. I'm in a men's league, and I have a guy on my team who is a narcotics officer here in Birmingham. And some of the stories that he shares are, pretty insane. I'm very grateful that I'm not in that line of work, and other people are doing that. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was a good time. It's good. To everybody in law enforcement now, we got to support law enforcement, and those guys they do a wonderful job. They're continuing doing a good job, and they need to be supported fully.
So let's talk. The channel is devoted to disability. If you could give us a little bit background of how you got involved in the disability community.
Yeah, I never really, obviously, growing up, and being in life really in general, disability exists. Wasn't really close to it, obviously, before my daughter was born. My daughter is Carly. She was born in February of 2011. And really, God blessing her with me, or me with her, rather, I should say, really kind of changed my life and really opened up my eyes and my heart for the disability community. She has developmental disability. She's got a disorder called CDKL5 deficiency disorder, and it's a pretty devastating developmental disability. But being blessed with her really opened up my eyes to a lot of really great and wonderful people, self-advocates, but also families. But I will tell you, it's kind of been one of these things that's I'm so glad has happened to open my eyes to this world, to know these great people. But on the family side of things, it gets to be a little bit difficult. So you kind of try to find the positives and negatives. But what really opened my eyes to the disability community was the birth of my daughter. So it's a challenge. It's one that I pray about a lot. But I also know now, since I'm in this role, I guess you can say, as her dad, along with her two siblings, is really knowing some of the challenges out there for people living with disabilities. And that's really across the board. And really, feel called not only for my daughter to really stand up and really talk about the issues for her and for families like ours, but really for everybody. So I guess you could say God kind of changed my heart and for the better. Not that I was cold-hearted back then. It's just what I tell people, some people just don't know what they don't know. And I did not know a lot of these issues for the developmental disability community and disability community as a whole really existed till my daughter was born. And really, taking it a little bit step further, really Carly's Law, when we really got advocating for the use of CBD oil in Alabama back in 2014, that's when that really, I guess you could say, really got me involved, not only in, advocating on, for some education stuff, for some local stuff, but really that's when I started to get to meet a lot of families in Alabama and with wonderful kids, but then also adults, getting to know those families. And that's what really catapulted me into thinking that, this is something I feel called to do, to really stand up for people. And that was a very trying time in 2014 when we pushed that through, Carly's Law. And there's much more work to do. So just really by the birth of my daughter and then doing that legislative work is really what got me where I am today as far as the advocacy part of things.
Now, you mentioned that Carly has two siblings. What is kind of the age there? Is she the youngest, middle, or oldest?
Yeah, Carly's the middle child. She's 21 months younger than her brother. He's 11, she's 10, and then we've got a 6-year-old. And, that's something very important. Parents really need to understand, and it's something we deal with as parents, obviously with special needs kids or kids with developmental disabilities, is the siblings matter too. So a lot of times you give a lot of attention to your child that may have the developmental disability, but they've got a brother or sister or both. And so she's got them, and, they have their certain challenges as well. And that's something that we have to keep an eye on and make sure that they know that they're loved and they have the attention that they need to really thrive in life. And that's just another interesting dynamic that I pray about a lot. And really has taught me a lot about obviously being a dad, but obviously being a dad with a child with a disability, not only for that child, but also for her brother and sister. And it's, I'm always transparent about things, or I try to be, and it's very tough, for parents, for siblings, just the questions that the siblings ask, about, their sister, Carly. There's been many times I've really, gone to my knees and cried. I'm not ashamed to admit it. There's several times that I've cried and really prayed about it. And really, I sometimes don't feel strong enough to be a dad of 3 kids. But God tells me differently, pretty much every time I pray. So we keep going, and it's something that we got to pay attention to the siblings too. And I think they go through a lot of things. Sometimes we know about those things if they tell us, but we really got to stay on top of that for them as parents, to make sure that they're living their life to the fullest as well.
And I know that sibling relationship can be difficult in some ways. I have a family member, an aunt, and she has 2 sisters. She is the youngest. And there were times when they were younger that some of their schoolmates would ask questions, hey, what's going on with your sister? Why isn't she speaking to us? That kind of stuff. And it was a little tough for them to navigate. And the parents, I talked to my grandparents about that at length and interviewed them, and and trying to navigate that for parents to support all children there can be tough. And I feel like it kind of goes through phases. When I spoke with my grandparents, there's a young age, and then there's kind of like the teenage year where other kids in the school can be kind of harsh. And then there's kind of the adult phase, and then the longer life care, long-term care phase there. But what were some of the questions that Carly's siblings are coming to you and asking, if you don't mind?
No, I don't mind sharing. My life's an open book, man. I hope people get something from the experiences we go through. But questions that kids would typically ask at the age that they ask them, being younger kids or younger siblings. My son was the first; he's the oldest, and really just going through things. Tough questions for me as a dad, and I know my wife Amy as a mom. About why she can't talk. That's a really big one. Really wishing that she could walk and play with them. The youngest child, Courtney, she just recently has been noticing at school that her friends at school are able to go see their sister, their bigger sister, and play with them after school. And that's being at school, waiting on the bus or waiting on carpool. And, her wanting that desire to play with her older sister, but, she's not able to do that as the other kids are able to do that. So, the questions of always, why can't she talk and why can't she walk? And then, it's questions along with the emotions too, of them saying, they really wish she could do things where, that they could play with her. Those are, it's tough things for me personally when they do that, ask questions, but, you got to be strong as a parent. And I think it's important for parents to understand, you need to address those issues really honestly with your children. That's the way we try to do it. But then also take time for yourself, after those questions. I mean, there's been, like I just previously mentioned, there's been a couple times, that they ask those questions. I address the question and answer it as honest as I can and being very straightforward. And then I take time for myself, and I've cried a few times after having to answer those questions. So it gets pretty tough. And we hope that the siblings obviously grow up with a greater knowledge of caring for people. That's what we pray and hope for. I think that is the case. Siblings of children with special needs, siblings are learning more of that empathy and understanding of that stuff. And like you mentioned, there could be stuff that goes on at school, that we either know about or don't know about sometimes. I think that comes into play. And there's only been really one instance that happened about Carly being in a wheelchair that Colton had to manage at school. And we wanted to address that. But it can be tough on siblings. And I just think it's important, to address that with the siblings and let them know that their sister loves them. She may not be able to tell them that verbally, but she does. And also know that, Carly was created by God just like they were. And so we really try to answer it honestly and transparent with kind of what really is going on. We never want to not address it. So we do. When they ask the questions, we just, we answer them as good as we can. And sometimes it's tough. Sometimes, as we all know, kids can ask very tough questions, but when it comes to Carly, those are usually the questions that we get, are the walk and talk questions.
As you're going through this, you're resonating power and strength here as you're going through this and navigating this time that you have. I'd just like to ask, where do you feel like you gain this strength and power? And where is that source coming from? Maybe other parents and individuals could kind of draw to that. And then the other question, when you do need some time off to kind of de-amplify or relax a little bit, what are some of those activities that help you?
Yeah, listen, I get my from my faith. The strength comes from my faith. Christ really has conquered all of this. And I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ. And I believe that he is the one and really has given me the strength. It's hard. I'm not perfect. That is something that this experience has really taught me, that I'm really imperfect and I need God. It's very tough. There's in the, from my viewpoint, talking about drawing strength, we did not, no parent that I know or that I've spoke to really prays while they're expecting a child. They don't pray for a child that's has a disability. You want them to be perfect, and that's what you think you're going to get. And sometimes that's not the answer that God has for you. And that's what, obviously with us, we didn't pray for that, but we have a wonderful, beautiful daughter that has been given to us exactly how he intended for that to be. And it's really up to us to look to him to strength, in my opinion. Look to God for strength. And know it's very important in my faith to know that Christ has really conquered this, and looking to him for that strength to push through this every time is really where I draw the strength from personally. But I will tell you, I believe, Carly has really, the situation, not just Carly herself, it's really the other siblings and really the family dynamic has really taught me a lot about myself. and being fully transparent with my faith, I really realized I probably wasn't as strong in my faith as I thought I was. And not until this experience, when she was diagnosed and what we have been through, did I really learn that I really needed to become a better Christian, look more to God for strength, and everything. But it's a struggle on a daily basis. Just because one gets strength or is a strong person in something, that doesn't mean it's really easy. I struggle about it on a daily basis. Me and my wife talk about a lot of things. Our family dynamic, much like a lot of families out there, is different. You can't do a lot of things that you would like to do a lot of the times, or if you're going to do those things, there's a lot of, you got to adapt to a lot of things to get to be able to do stuff. And you just kind of manage those situations. So finding strength from God to do that, and I encourage parents, you got to find some strength somewhere. But also know that there are a lot of parents going through this at the same time or a like situation. And you can draw strength from other parents and having support groups and everything. But remember, it's a struggle for everybody, in my opinion. My struggles are no worse than anyone else's struggles, even with people that live with disabilities. There is a struggle, and everybody struggles, and they find their strength where they're going to find it. I encourage people to find it in faith, because I truly feel like faith is really what pushes us through. It's difficult at times. It's difficult to put your strength or know that your strength comes from faith, but I believe it does. And that's really what's gotten me this far. But it is a struggle on a daily basis. So I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't pretend to be the strongest guy in these situations, because it's very tough for me mentally. It's tough for me physically and even emotionally going through it.
I feel like, excuse me, that's a central theme when I ask people is faith. And I think that can be a very powerful thing. And we have such a great church system here in Alabama. And we've had the opportunity to do a few broadcasts with different church organizations and churches themselves. If you don't mind me asking, which church do you guys go to? And if you'd like to highlight some success stories from the community there at the church, specifically with special needs or intellectual disability.
No doubt. We are members of Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church. What drew us to that church is obviously we love the pastor there, Pastor Flahart. But we also they have a program called Mustard Seeds, and I always give them a shout out. And Joanna Ward that does that really does a wonderful job. And it was a welcoming environment for us. We felt kind of at home, and that's what you look for in a church. And I challenge all churches really to really check and see if you are being as welcoming as you can to families with individuals with disabilities. But we felt at home there, and Miss Ward always does. She does a great job doing that. And there's other families that attend there as well. And the pandemic has kind of threw us off a little bit, being able to attend church in person. We got to feel comfortable in doing that. But they got a great online program, obviously, to keep us up to date with that. So yeah, you're right. I mean, we're in the deep South where faith plays a big part of a lot of people's lives. And it's one of these things, and I don't share this story much, but it wasn't until recently till I bought a Bible as an adult. I mean, like I said, man, my life's an open book. I'm not afraid to share anything. And so it's interesting, it's the church has always been there, and it's been through a lot of things and obviously in society, and it's always been there for us. And, are people being gravitated toward their faith? And, like I said a little bit earlier, I found that, prior to these struggles that we go through now, or that I call struggles, and some of them are triumphs, don't misunderstand. Some of them are triumphs. But with the struggles, you find, are you truly as strong in your faith as you thought you were? And that's something I'm pretty open about, that I don't believe that I was. And I'm trying to get better every day, trying to treat situations a little bit differently than maybe I would. And so, yeah, Oak Mountain Presbyterian has been a great for us. And we hope to kind of get back there pretty soon to go in person, because I think it's very important.
From speaking with everybody and having that faith base, I used to go to church quite a bit when I was younger, and then in my late 20s, kind of haven't. And I'll be honest, I haven't really since I've been here in Alabama for the past 4 years. But I've had this kind of yearning to want to go back, and to take my grandmother with me as well, and kind of get back into that realm. I feel like there've been a few times this past year where it's been a little hectic, and I struggle a little bit with mental health. And like being in lockdown, I'm very outgoing. I want to be around people. That's kind of how I draw energy. I get amped up about that. And, depression and stuff like that will take its toll. And I think that having that rock there, and that sounds a little selfish saying that, but I've been being drawn toward that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, in certain situations, will draw you to that, a little more, I believe. And I'm a believer that obviously we go through our life experiences for a reason, and maybe and I always say maybe these reasons are to bring me closer to my faith. And it's not just my daughter Carly; it's my son, being his dad, and being my youngest dad as well, and then being a husband. Listen, my wife, speaking of rocks, she's really a rock of this family. I couldn't go through this without her. So she has been wonderful, and I think she would also agree that it's brought her closer to faith. And it's important for me to include this as well, that my parents really, I was raised in church, and my parents have been great. It wasn't that I never went to church or didn't believe in God or didn't believe in Christ. It's just, I guess I did. Didn't really maybe truly know what it meant to really walk like Christ, or the best that we could. And now really in the last 10, 11 years, I view things a lot differently than I did 10 or 11 years ago. And some of that is in faith. And then some of that is in just as a walk in society, seeing the struggles that I didn't know existed. And now how do we, I think it's important if we're people of faith, and we're people of Christ, in my opinion, that we've got to do better for everybody. And we can't really ignore certain groups because we either don't agree with them, or we, a lot of people think that they don't matter. Everybody matters. Every human life matters. And, we got to not just talk about it. There's got to be actionable items to make sure that everybody is cared for. And if they have struggle, obviously they're going through it. We want to pray for them. But we also want to help them the best that we can if we have that ability and capability to do that.
Now, excuse me, outside of faith, are there some ways that you like to decompress, maybe at the end of the week or the end of the day, just you personally?
Geez, good question. Not really. It's I don't watch much TV. I don't do that. I've tried to read more. Like I said, I've tried to read the Bible more. Of course, I will admit these last probably month, I really haven't done a great job of doing that. I have tried to read more. Work always comes into play a little bit, but if I ever get a chance just to kind of decompress by myself in kind of the man cave or whatever, I try to watch maybe something on TV. But I really don't have any kind of routine that I go to decompress. I truly don't. I pray a lot about it. And really for me, prayer, takes a lot off my back and a lot off the weight off my chest. It seems like, giving up my struggles to Christ, and knowing that really what he went through really is really the true struggle, and really putting that on him and bringing that to him does a lot for me. But as far as outside of faith, it's really kind of hard for me to look at something that I do. I used to like to play golf. I don't play golf much anymore. And so I guess I just bury my head in work and try to see what we can do next in advocacy and see where we can help people out, I guess. But I really don't have anything. I know that's kind of a bad answer for you, but it's not I really don't have anything, that I turn to decompress.
Well, you're young, healthy, and fit. I thought you were going to say CrossFit.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm probably
I thought you were going to go out to the CrossFit gym.
I'm probably the furthest person from CrossFit. In fact, that's a good point. I probably need to exercise. We've actually talked about that, is probably more exercise would help out with the stress and decompress. So that we have talked about that here at the house about doing that. And we're trying to get towards that.
I'm not a big fan of the CrossFit. I feel like my joints would just fall out, like my knees would fall out of my legs. They're a little bit old.
A lot of that stuff you're
Let's
not
talk.
supposed to do, are you?
Yeah, exactly. I need a new. I went to the doctor the other day. My shoulder's been killing me, and I fell down pretty hard on the ice in hockey. And I'm like, something's going on. Let's fix it. And he just looks at me. He goes, "Yeah, you got arthritis. You're gonna have
You're
that
getting
for the
old.
rest of your life." Yeah. Like, hey, don't you want to go in there and like cut away and put in something? He's like, no, you just got arthritis.
They're not going to do it.
Yeah. Let's talk about Carly's Law. If you could introduce that to the audience and give a little bit of history.
Yeah, my daughter Carly, she was having seizures at 8 weeks old. She was having several seizures a day. And to give you kind of the quick version, it was a pretty miserable time for the family, and really looking for solutions to try to stop the seizures. They started at 8 weeks old, like I said, and really were just happening all the time. At one point, she was having 200 to 300 seizures per day. And that is a very hopeless and very scary time for parents and individuals, of course. And so really just looking for a solution. We've tried, at the time we had tried several medications and they were all failing. There was nothing working. And so really, Dr. Sanjay Gupta's documentary, it was called Weed. And I was a police officer at the time. And I sat down and watched the documentary called Weed that covered Charlotte Figge's story. God rest her soul. She was an angel to all of us. After I watched that program, it was talking about CBD oil in Colorado and how children, in specific Charlotte Figge, was getting relief from CBD oil. So kind of fast forward the story a little bit. Really just thinking about why can't people in Alabama have that option? And so got a meeting with Robert Bentley, former Governor Robert Bentley, and really just talked to him about, three things about special education, about disability funding for disability things across the state. And then my last request was, hey, if you ever see a bill that comes across your desk that has to do with a derivative of cannabis, like CBD oil or anything, please don't veto it. And so we had that discussion, and then I saw a write-up that he said he was against everything to do with that and whatnot. And so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And so I decided we're going to have to take this and try to create some laws for CBD oil. And really, we created the laws, Carly's Law, and it kind of took a lot of different iterations throughout that session in 2014. And it ended up allowing UAB to do a pretty comprehensive study on CBD oil and if it really does help with seizures or does it not. It obviously turns out that it does. And Carly was able to get on that oil, I think it was April of 2015. And it was really, I believe, about her second dose, we could tell a difference.
Really?
And we know it's not a silver bullet for everybody. And you've got to be careful with CBD oil. I always say that if I ever talk about it, and it was kind of not her silver bullet. She still has seizures. And that happens. But it improved her quality of life. And that's really what we were going through. But, it's one of these things, or going for, but it's one of these things when we were trying to pass Carly's Law's legislation, we were doing it for the people of Alabama. We were going on anecdotal evidence out of Colorado. I even went to Colorado to visit some families that left Alabama to live in Colorado. I wanted to meet them. I actually wanted to know where the oil that everybody was using out there, where it was coming from. I visited the grows and met them. And it's an interesting dynamic that I was a police officer and doing that. A lot of people ask me that. And I'm very transparent. I arrested a lot of people for drugs because that's the laws on the books. So, but my opinion toward medical cannabis started to change back then when my daughter started getting help. And really, truly, when she started getting help and other people were getting help with CBD oil, it really just started. It changed my perspective on medical cannabis. Because people needed help. When your daughter is having 200 to 300 seizures per day, the small ones, but she was having some of the big tonic-clonics, or what they used to call grand mal seizures, multiple of those a day, it's a miserable feeling. As a dad that thinks you can control everything for your child, and that's just not the case with seizure control. And she developed or she received help with CBD oil and had the help of a physician in that. And that's where we need to get, I feel, on the bigger discussion of medical cannabis with a physician's help. That's where that need to be. And that's kind of how my viewpoints changed to that. But it was a great win for the people back then. But I always want to mention, Carly's Law changed my perspective on medical cannabis only when physicians and people that researched it showed me the studies. Dr. Slavarsky, that's been on a Facebook Lives with me a couple times or a few times, we'll talk about it, about what does it help and what does it not help. But if people can get help from cannabis oil or anything with the help of their physician and do it responsibly in the right way, I want people to get help just like my daughter did, not only in epilepsy, but if it's with other conditions and it's shown to help, then those people need safe access for that, because it gets to be a hopeless feeling, not only for your loved one, it is hopeless for them, it feels, but it is for the parents too. And it's important to make sure that they have access to that and get help like my daughter did. And really, Carly's Law really is what, like I previously mentioned, is what really got me into advocacy legislatively. And really, it's really what turned me into more of an advocate for the disability community.
We have a friend here at Alabama Care who also does broadcast, Antoine Jordan, and he has a son that has some seizures, or has quite a bit of seizures, specifically depending on the weather, he says. You mentioned that Carly started having seizures at about 8 months old.
8 weeks.
Or 8 weeks old. Is there a bottom limit to when an infant or a child could start receiving CBD?
Well, obviously I would encourage everybody to do their research and talk to their physician. I know, there is, you need to wait till they're a little older. Obviously I'm no physician on that and don't know the exact age. I would assume it may be 2 years and up. I can't remember the exact protocol back when Carly's Law study was going on, but there's so much literature out there for that. There are support groups for that, but I encourage anybody that is looking into that. You've got to be careful with CBD oil. There are a lot of things to think about. I do not feel personally it is something you can go down to the corner store and pick up and it be what you think it is. You got to be very careful what's in the bottle. You really need to talk to your physician or your child's pediatrician about it. I'm all about obtaining their help, and if they're not willing to help you, then you can ask around of people that may be willing to help you. We know that CBD oil has interactions with certain medications. And if we know that is the truth, and it's proven, then you got to be very careful. I'm not against it. I'm just, if you're doing it, you want to do it safe. And so you need to talk to a physician about that. But obviously people under 18 are taking it. My child took it at a very young age. I think she was 3 and a half, 4-ish. She was younger than that. My wife, by the way, tells me I'm terrible with dates and times. I will say one thing happened in 1 year and my wife will correct me and says, no, that was in a totally different year. So I may not be totally accurate because my mind's not with it, but she would be quick to say that if she was on. But you need to talk to a pediatrician and ask them. But I will say, having said that, I think it's worth, if you are at the end of your rope and you've tried several different medications. I believe Carly failed 11 to 12 medications, traditional medications, and none of them worked. We were told Klonopin at a very young age. She was taking Klonopin, that Klonopin was going to stop seizures dead in their tracks. And we put her on Klonopin and it didn't happen. And she took a lot of medications like that. And so we were at the point where that's kind of what got us into the Carly's Law thing, was that we needed help. And if to me, it is hard to understand how suffering people in Alabama that could possibly get help from that have to watch other people in other states, get their suffering at least under control or stopped. That's something that people of Alabama deserve. And there's a piece of legislation going through the process now for a medical cannabis program for other conditions that needs to be done reasonably and responsibly, and the people of Alabama can get help, and there's physicians that are willing to help them. That's what we have to connect, and the people of Alabama need that, and the parents need that. Along for their children, the parents are trying to help their kids. There's no other helpless feeling on planet Earth when you can't help your own child. I'll tell you, I've been there, and going in and out of hospitals and trying to figure it out, and running the gamut of tests, and not being able to figure out. First, for us, it was we kind of had a two-headed dragon. We had something that was going on with our child, and it was seizures, and we didn't know how to control them. And at the very beginning, we thought, if we could control the seizures, then she has epilepsy. She developed epilepsy, and if we could control those, she's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna work out. She'll just take her medication. She'll go to school. She'll do everything she's gonna do. Well, it turns out we got another head of the dragon, and that was the disorder that she was finally diagnosed with. And back then, it's still pretty rare. And back then, it was very rare. And that's, a double dose of pretty bad news. And so we just got to the point on that is, if we can control the seizure part of it, there's no cure for CDKL5 disorder. There's really no good treatments for it. I know they're trying to get better with that, but there's really no answer for CDKL5 deficiency disorder. So we do the best we can to give her the best quality of life. Well, giving her best quality of life is controlling the seizures for her and for thousands of other Alabamians out there as well. It comes down to a quality of life issue that for parents with children, you get to in this hopeless state. You want to help your child. You want them not to suffer from seizures. They're terrible. You don't know when they happen. You can't do anything about them. They can also go into status where they're just not coming out of a seizure. And then there's SUDEP, sudden unexpected death from epilepsy involved. And that could happen with any seizure that your child has. As a parent, you want that under control. And, and obviously CBD has helped us out. She's not on monotherapy, meaning it's just one drug. She takes some others along with it. We've had to kind of adjust that here recently. But it has helped, and I hope it helps a lot of people. I just, again, want to make sure people speak to their physician, to their pediatrician, and make sure that's the right step for them. But I will tell you, seizures make you feel pretty helpless. And I've talked to a lot of individuals, adults with epilepsy, and it is a quality of life issue for people living with epilepsy that if we can help them improve their quality of life, then that's what we need to do.
Now, you mentioned that you can get CBD at the corner store now, and I hear radio ads for it, so it's pretty widespread. Pretty much anybody can go and get it. But as you mentioned, please speak with your physician before you start taking any medications like that, especially if you're already on medication. And then you mentioned, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to mention, that there are differences in CBD oil. There's going to be a difference of product of what you can buy at the gas station or at a CBD store, and what maybe you could buy in another state that's going to be different. You've got to be very careful in knowing exactly what is in the bottle. Who knows what could be in the bottle. You've got to be very safe with it, using reputable oil and knowing that you get a lab result with it, not just a lab result from a whole batch of oil, but one for that specific bottle. I'm just really big on safety. And knowing what you're doing and having help of a physician or a pediatrician obviously helps that. And I just highly encourage people to be careful and make sure they seek out doctors' help and opinion on that.
Now, as a narcotics officer, switching over, I don't want to say switching over, but going to really Carly's Law and CBD being available, was that kind of a progression for you, or was it like you went out to Colorado and you saw the effects and you're like, no, this needs to happen now?
Well, no, the progression for me was really just in CBD oil. It started with CBD oil. And really it's my daughter suffering is what did it. I watched the documentary from Dr. Gupta about, it was called Weed. I mean, that's what they called the documentary. Went out there to just meet families and see if, how does this, who are these people that get help that are from Alabama? They're great and wonderful people. They had to move because they didn't have access to that here, and met them. But it was really that coupled with my own daughter suffering, and getting to the point to saying, wow, there are a lot more people that are suffering than just my own daughter. And if it can help just one person, I'm willing to step up and fight for that. And that was kind of the progression of knowing, really, it's really trying to help your child. But then it really got to the point of really meeting the families out in Colorado, and then meeting hundreds of other families that could probably get help for their children. That really is what turned it, to me, saying that something's got to be done, not only for my child, because my child may not benefit, because at the time we didn't know if it would help. But if it could help one other person, then I'm willing to fight for that. So we did. And really another progression for me was seeing the studies of medical cannabis in general. The studies are out there to read. I know you have to have safety is a big concern in everything, but I was approached by Dr. Slavarsky in 2000, I believe it was 17, coming back to me, and we had become friends, and he asking me, what do we think we can do to put a more comprehensive medical cannabis bill up? And I just didn't think it was the right time. And I wanted to do my own due diligence, but seeing the studies that were showing that there are benefits, obviously, and in other conditions other than epilepsy, then that's when 2 years ago I helped a group of people write the bill that kind of has made it through the Senate twice and is in the legislature now. And that's really the progression was, and I will tell you, I didn't think medical cannabis had any place really anywhere before my daughter was born. My daughter was born. She started having seizures. CBD oil helped her. It's now helped a lot of other people, and that kind of changed my heart there. And then it was more of a progression. And, you mentioned police work. In police work, you go, when you're solving a crime or you're solving something, you're going where the evidence takes you. If you go where the evidence takes you on medical cannabis, you go to the conclusion, in my opinion, that there are a lot more people that can get help. Now, there is a right way, in my belief, and there's a wrong way to do it. I think there's a right and reasonable way to do that. And I think that piece of legislation that's up now is that way. And I'm for that now. And that's not something I would have said 11 years ago, prior to my daughter being born. And I'm just going where the evidence takes me. But I've prayed a lot about that. I've prayed about that and seek guidance on that from God for that. And it's just one of those things that I believe people can get help, but I also understand the rules of how laws are made and how things have to be done. And it's really up to the legislature to see if it's the right thing for Alabama. But I know that they care, and I hope and pray that they do the right thing for the people.
We have a question here. What are your thoughts on Delta 8 THC? I'm unfamiliar with Delta 8. Are you familiar with Delta 8?
Well, I think that's the new, I believe, I'm not real familiar with it. I believe that's the new thing that's out that you can buy that's legal to purchase, Delta 8. And I think it's pretty much all over some of these stores. I'm not real familiar with that. I know that I'm a believer in true cannabis therapy, I guess you could call it, but having a comprehensive and the full entourage effect of having that available. I believe that things need to be controlled and know what's in every bottle and know what the product is. And I think it has to be, it's a seed to sale kind of thing. I think it needs to be, we need to know how it's grown, how it's packaged, how it's processed, what's in it. And then have a physician's oversight on helping that patient out. And the legislation that's in now, it does that. And I think the Delta 8 that the person's referring to, I don't have a lot of information on that. I don't even know if it helps anything. What I do know is if you think it helps, you need to do a lot of research and ask a physician about it. And I can tell you, in my opinion, if this bill will pass through the legislature, you don't have to worry about if you have a true medical condition, obviously, and going through the proper process. It's no longer hopefully no longer having to try to go find it in a store. You'll have a good, safe, accessible place to get oil and products for that your physician thinks will help you out.
Now, if we take that a step further, now legislation is on the floor down in Montgomery for medical cannabis to be passed here in Alabama. What about the next step for recreational?
Yeah, me personally, I'm not for recreational. I'm not for recreational. cannabis. I'm strictly for medical. And in Alabama, if somebody wants to pass a bill for recreational cannabis, then they're more than willing to try to do that. That's not something I am for. And I'm just really strictly for the medical side of cannabis, and really having a physician's help with that. So no, it's really here where I think we can help a lot of suffering people with the medical side of things.
Now that the legislation is down in Montgomery this year for the medical cannabis, what can we as an audience and community members do to help that pass?
Well, for anything, if you believe in it, you need to. It's amazing if you learn the process, and what a lot of people refer to it as is how the sausage is truly made in Montgomery. Where the bills are passed. It's not really like civics class that you learned about in school. It's a more difficult process. It's a lot different. I encourage everyone to know their state level senator and their state level House rep that works in the House of Representatives. You need to know those people. It's amazing how many people don't know them. And I don't know if I knew mine exactly before I got involved in legislative advocacy. But you need to know them. If you're for the bill and for the legislation, you need to call them on the phone. The people's voice needs to be heard on a lot of issues, but a lot of people either don't know how to do that or when to do that. Right now, obviously, I would encourage people to go to the state house and talk to their representative or their state senator. However, the pandemic has kind of changed a lot of those rules in the state house. So you kind of have to have an appointment. So it's a little bit more difficult. But I'm a believer in personal stories. If you have a personal story for any piece of legislation, but especially medical cannabis, if it has helped you or somebody you love, or it could, sharing those personal stories with state lawmakers makes a difference. And calling them on the phone and letting them know that, and then sending emails. I'm not a big fan of the canned emails that some organizations do a lot of times with a lot of different pieces of legislation. I think you need to create personal emails that tells your story specifically, and getting those to the lawmakers. But calling the lawmakers work for us. We put them in office. We either vote for them. Even if you don't vote for them, if they're in your district and they're your state senator or state rep, they work for you. And I fully believe in the people's voice for calling them up and having a good discussion with them. And I'm always a proponent of being respectful, being polite. You're not going to get every representative to agree with you on every topic, but sharing your personal story and sharing why you support something is always helpful to a cause, and sharing that personal connection to that, but doing it in a respectful and polite way, I think goes a long way.
Now, you're a very well-spoken person and hold authority there. And so I feel like sometimes people in the community could seem like they're uncomfortable reaching out to representatives. But what you said there is, you don't forget that these representatives work for you. So don't ever be timid to pick up that phone and dial.
Yeah, and if you can ever have a meeting with them, obviously pandemic restrictions, obviously we know about that. Don't be scared to talk to them. They want to hear from you. I think personally there's some that they're set in their ways and they're there and they've been there a long time, but I still say go talk to them. But it's important to share the story, and being respectful to lawmakers is very important. I know a lot of these, listen, when it comes to children, you can get very passionate. You can get very angry when things are not going your way. I've been there. You don't think something's going your way, and you really want to argue with somebody. You really want to take it out on somebody. It's hard. You got to try to do that because emotions can take over. But being very respectful and polite is the way to go in that. Being cordial. But I believe, and listen, when we talk about just about those issues, but I think in other issues, when we talk about disability, my goal and my want in any piece of legislation, not just the medical side of things, but for things like transportation and things about meaningful employment or any other pieces of legislation, I want those individuals with disabilities and those groups to have a seat at the table. I don't feel like a lot of times in my belief that a lot of times they have a seat at the table to have that discussion. And I think their voice needs to be heard. There's several individuals, thousands of us, families and loved ones and individuals. They need a seat at every table about every piece of legislation that is passed. There are some great networks of people that do that already. But I want an even bigger seat at the table where those issues of people living with disabilities are heard, taken seriously as a group, and really acted on the best way possible. I know transportation is a major issue for a lot. I also know employment is, and those issues need to be addressed. And I want everybody to have a seat at the table. And I think that's something that needs to be done. And the lawmakers need to hear that. If they have an individual with disabilities that call them up, take them seriously. They're going to say that they do, and I hope they do. But I hope every lawmaker, if they hear this, that there are large numbers of people that need services, that need things going on, and that need a seat at the table. On all the issues. It's not just, like I said, not just medical cannabis or something like that. I mean, you can look at educational stuff. Children receiving special education services, they need a seat at the table. There are a lot of things that can be done different, in my opinion, that can be looked at. I mean, we've got reading proficiency levels for children with receiving special education services that are very low. And why is that? If a child can't read, and we're not talking about, a lot of children that are receiving special education services are not cognitively impaired enough not to be able to learn to read. They can read. Why are we having such low numbers in proficiency levels of reading? If a child can't read coming out of school, then how do we expect them to get meaningful employment or be really productive? That's what this life is about, is being productive and going out there and working. Just because you receive special education services doesn't mean you can't do that when you get out. You can. Doesn't mean just because you have a disability doesn't mean you can't have a job. You can have a job. But in education, and I sit on the special education advisory panel for Alabama, and that's why I know some of these numbers. Those numbers have to get better for children receiving special education services, and reading in specific. Technology can do a lot of things, but if you can't read to a certain level, it's hard to go places. And a lot of times, children or individuals make poor decisions at times, and they end up in prison. I mean, there's the whole discussion of school to prison pipeline that I think needs to always be in the forefront of our mind. And if we have low numbers in reading levels and proficiency in special education, that needs to be addressed. Lawmakers, I think, need to show about that.
That literacy is a huge barrier. You have the world at your fingertips if you have a computer or a phone and the internet, but if you can't decipher what it's telling you or what you're trying to figure out, I think you hit it on the head where there's a pipeline there of possible places that your future could look like, and it looks limited if you don't have literacy there. I didn't think about literacy in special education before. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, it's an issue. I mean, you don't know, and this is not a knock at you, so don't misunderstand me. People don't know that's an issue because it's not often talked about. We have got issues in special education that nobody hears about because nobody is talking about them. Nobody is bringing these to the attention. They can be brought to the attention of the state school board, and I'm not really sure the state school board knows much about special education. I believe children with receiving special education services, they need representation at all levels of education, true representation, somebody that knows about special education services. Obviously, there are a lot of parents in this state that know a lot about it. They need to have seats at the table. I'm a proponent of having special education advisory panels on the state or a federally mandated thing at the state level. Some function better than others, really. I think there should be special education advisory panels at local levels. That should be really in tune with special education services at that district level for the schools. Even through this pandemic, there's things that children receiving special education services possibly needed to be in school. They needed services. They needed things to be going on. A lot of times school boards do understand that, and a lot of times they don't. And these issues in special education are not oftentimes talked about. I think people genuinely care But I think they look at special education as, oh, well, they can't do certain things and they're doing the best we can and we're doing the best we can, or they'll blame funding. Well, to me, that we need to raise the level of standard of belief of what these kids can do, because they can do great things. Yet if we're not giving them the education in our school systems, how are we going to expect them to do that? So we've got to pay attention to that. We've got to talk about those issues, and we've got to have people in positions that truly care, that can make those things happen for those kids. And then when you age out at 21, sometimes for certain students, for parents, I mean, what options are there? We've just got to start talking about these issues and taking them a little bit more seriously. I don't think that, and this is my opinion, no opinion of anybody else, just mine, that I think special education services is oftentimes just an afterthought. I encourage everybody that's listening to this, ask their local school district today or tomorrow or Monday. Ask their school board, the CARES money that they received, how is that being spent on individuals with disabilities in their school system? They're supposed to have a plan for that. I believe it was submitted to the State Board of Education, but as far as transparency, I don't know where any of those are to read. You need to know where the money's spent. There is money given to school districts for students with disabilities. And how is that CARES money being spent for your child receiving special education services? So obviously being respectful, some school districts probably are doing, are very transparent, but there could be school systems that are not. I would love to know where that money's being spent on children with disabilities in our schools. Where is that being spent, and how is that benefiting those students?
I imagine that the school directors, although they have that plan, it could almost be like, not that they don't want to share it, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, we're doing that, but we don't really want to talk about that. I don't know why I feel that way, but.
Well, okay. Well, here's the thing. The parents, listen, and I understand, before I even say this, it is very hard on parents. A lot of times you have to work, you've got to make a living, you've got the stress of having a child with a disability or stuff like that going on with internally. You're stressed out with other things. You have other kids, you've got sports going on. Life is happening and taking place. However, we as the people have got to hold administrators and school boards and others accountable for our children's education. They have to be held accountable. And especially when we talk about CARES money, we've got to hold them accountable on how that money is being spent. There needs to be more transparency, in other words, and parents and people, just people in general. You don't have to have a parent you don't have to have a child in a school system. But demand transparency on how that money is being spent. And I'm speaking specifically on children receiving special education services, individuals with disabilities in our schools. How is it benefiting them? And there are plans, I believe, why they are not being posted up on the state's website, I'm not real sure. Maybe they are at your local level, but we got to hold people accountable. And really all that is asking where this is, how is this being spent? And how is this benefiting the student? And I think accountability is very important in education in a lot of areas of life, but so is transparency.
And I imagine for those schools, sharing that it would allow them to see what other people are doing. You can sit in a room all day and formulate a plan, but your neighbor might have a little bit better idea in one area. So to be able to exchange ideas there for the school systems, I think is a great idea. And I'm right with you. I don't know why the state doesn't have those listed right up on their page.
Yeah, and if they do, then I'd love to see where it is. I have not seen it yet. There are other states. You can go to other states in the United States and look at those, and you can see plans and see ways they're doing things. We've just got to be better at accountability and transparency, and we need to bring the issues of special education services as a whole up to people and make sure that those kids are being thought about at every level of decision making.
I feel like the disability community here in Alabama is very strong. Everyone is very well versed, has personal experiences. But as for like myself, I have a family member, but before I moved to Alabama, I never really had an entrance into the community. And so even though the disability community is very strong here in Alabama, there's almost a disconnect when it comes to decision makers at higher levels. And I feel like that's just the lack of access of being in the community and having contact with people with a disability. And I feel like if we could just do that, and what you're saying is by getting them at the table, getting people that have experience with a disability, their family members at the table to help make decisions would almost be like, be a light switch for those top decision makers there that kind of trickle down in the laws.
Well,
I think that's something better.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is, technically, is really nobody. You really don't understand something unless it personally impacts you. If you're not personally impacted, I am one of those people. Until my daughter, until we were blessed with my daughter, I really didn't understand the issues that for families, for others, and then I've been introduced to other situations that of people fighting for advocacy and fighting for things. They just don't understand it unless they're personally impacted by it. That's why personal stories are very important. But I think it's also important for the disability community to come together as one. I mean, there's several different areas of disability, so to speak, and we're really all on one team, in my opinion. And one thing that can help one person can help the other. It doesn't matter if you have a disorder, there's no, if it's going to help one, let's help everybody. And it's a large group. I mean, it is a large group, but if you go off into individual cells, so to speak, the numbers are doing, and I get it. There are certain things and organizations that want to do things for their community, and I get that, and I think that's important. But as a whole, I mean, we've got to start looking at the disability community as the larger community, and making sure that those voices are heard when decisions are being made. And that's at every level of government, in my opinion. But it takes a lot. It takes a lot. I mean, you either got to visit school board meetings, or you have to go to city council meetings or county commission meetings. But I think that just, they need to have their voices heard, and lawmakers from the governor on down through our whole governmental system, the system of government, needs to know that the disability community is a large community. They're wonderful people, and they mean a lot to the state.
Now, going through that legislative process, and you've been involved in a few here, is there one thing that if you were to do it starting from scratch again, is there one thing that you would do different? And is there one thing that you would say this worked really well, and I would encourage anybody that's getting into this legislative advocacy to definitely do?
It's an interesting question. It's a good question. I think the things that I really learned from doing, and listen, when I started, it was really drinking from a fire hose, so to speak. It was very quick. I didn't really understand it. I was learning on the fly. Other families joined in. I think it's important to get a lot of families joined in on a certain cause that believe in it. Finding the right bill sponsor. If there is a bill, the piece of legislation that is written, or the idea that you have for a piece of legislation, or if it's an organization looking, the proper bill sponsor is pretty critical. Not just if they're a good person or this or that. It's really what people don't understand about government and state government is there are key positions in state government. Like Speaker of the House is very powerful. There's Rules Committee Chairman that is very powerful. People that make decision on what gets debated and when it gets debated, and committee membership on the state level. A lot of good bills that have been presented have technically died in committee. You've kind of got to know the process. So I think one thing I would encourage people to know before they set out to do anything, and it's what I didn't know to do, is to learn the actual process of how a piece of legislation is introduced, and then know exactly the process by which it goes through, about committee assignments, what public hearings are, what is important, who are the important key players and what positions. Knowing all of that is a huge help. But then getting support of the public. I'm still a big believer that the public has a big voice, and if their voice is loud enough, the lawmakers will listen, because that's who, like we say that they like to, we like to say that they work for the people. But if you have a large contingency of people that are for a bill, they need to have their voice heard and kind of get them in the right thing. I am not a fan of canned emails that, I think they serve a purpose. I'm more for personal emails hundreds and hundreds of personal stories of emails that are going to these lawmakers that are individualized to the individual family or person, I think goes a long way. But really, I think the best thing to know is actually how the process works. That is not something before you go into it, or I didn't personally. I just learned it the hard way. I've learned a whole bunch that way, and it's not something really you can. It's readily available. You just have to kind of go do your own due diligence and figure out how a bill moves through the process, because there are a lot of things that take place. And just knowing that, I think that's a big help.
When you go through that, it sounds like there's almost there can be hiccups sometimes as a bill goes through that process, and you almost have to find the right champions to get it over that hill in the legislature. Like, no, we're going to focus on this till we get it to the next step.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of steps. I mean, you got to take it one step at a time and know what, if a bill is changed, it's, amendments can be added. There's a lot of things, and there's a lot of ways that the opposition can try to kill the bill, and you need to kind of know that kind of stuff. But it is a process. I respect the process. I'm a believer that if you don't like the way something is working in our society or in our government, then go try to change the law. Go do that. I'm a proponent in it. I may not agree with you. I may not agree with the idea, but if it's something that is important to you, then try to create the piece of legislation and then go do that. I'll tell you something. I used to, there are a lot of lobbyists in Montgomery as well. These companies have lobbyists, and there are places for lobbyists. People always like to point blame at lobbyists, and I've done at times. It's they're an easy scapegoat a lot of times, but a lot of people, there are lobbyists there. You've just got to know that. And a lot of them are making big money to fight for the cause of their client. And, sometimes it's hard to get around that. And other times it's not, but they're down there. I think there's probably over 500 to 600 of them down there registered maybe. But companies have that. They have them, but who can be a lobbyist is you. You may not be a lobbyist. Maybe you're just an advocate, but you can do it as well. Your voice is just as powerful or just as meaningful as a lobbyist. They may have some power because of who they are and how they've positioned themselves, but you are just much a part of the process as anyone else, and your voice can be heard.
Now that you've kind of gone through the process and are self-taught a lot through there, do you see yourself ever thinking about running for representation in the future?
Who knows what the future holds for me, but that's not on the plate right now.
I think you never know. From the disability community. I know you get a ton of support from the disability community.
Yeah, I've been asked that question a few times, and it's one of those things that I used to always think I have the answer for everything and would say yes or no or whatever. I truly don't know what the future holds for me. I'm just going to keep fighting for some of those that may not be able to fight. I'm going to start. I'm still going to raise issues on the way that I do and that I feel that works. Not for me. It's just it's a point now where I've seen a lot of things and talked to a lot of families and know there's a lot of issues. And I just want to make sure the right people hear them. And I'm going to still advocate for that. But as far as, running for office, you never know. I don't think I want to do that. But I can't say a definite no for anything. And that's really true to what I'm having for lunch this afternoon is I don't even know the answer to that. So, but no, I just pray that I honestly pray that our disability community, not only the children, but the adults. I'm so thankful for them that have taught me a lot about life in general. The families that have taught me a lot, but the individuals that may have certain disabilities, I just want them to know that they're loved. And there's people out here fighting for them, not just me. And I've met a lot of the people that have advocated several years and decades before me. I think it's a good thing to learn that from people and to love people and people with disabilities and their families have taught me how to love other people really. And I think that's an important part about it. So you never know what the future holds, but it's something I will say this, laws can do a lot of things, right? And I think this was said when the ADA was signed decades ago. We can make laws all we want. Laws can be changed, laws can be written, but it's really the changed heart that matters. Changed hearts are what is really what's going to make a better future for our state, for our cities, and for this country. And I just pray for changed hearts, not only for the disability community, but for everybody. Everybody has a changed heart, obviously for them, but also for one another.
Going through that, I feel like you're an unsung hero and champion for the disability community. Many people may not know your name yet, but the things that you do and the impact it has at the local community level, all the way up to the state level, everybody benefits from. So very appreciative, and I'm sure a lot of people are there. I would like to acknowledge Vera Lewis Spinks says, I'm jumping in late here, but partners in policymaking, getting partners in policymaking started back up in Alabama would be of great benefit to increase the broader community's knowledge and how to advocate for the change at the policy level. We've been discussing that going on in our ADAP PADD Council meeting today. And that was here a little bit before my time, but I've been hearing a lot of talk about partners in policymaking recently.
Yeah, partners in policymaking, I think would be great. I know it works in other states, and has been working well in other states. I don't know the history on why it is not here right now. I know it was, and maybe is gone. I think they're right. I know the ADAP does a lot of good work. And back to your comment, really, it's the individuals with disabilities. They're the true champions. They're the true champions of this. Of everything. And I think that would help as well, of course. I just think also we need to have lawmakers and leaders with the hearts for all people. And I'm not saying that all of them do not care about people with disabilities, but I want more people that really take these issues to heart and look for real meaningful solutions, bringing in those living with disabilities to help make those solutions become a reality. And I know there's a lot of great people doing great work. I'm just me. I'm nothing special. I know there's a lot of great people doing work and will continue to do work. I'm going to work on that front. And I'm going to work on the changed heart front too. I think we just got to change some hearts by the way we look at things. And like she said, partners in policymaking would obviously be great, I believe, and would work wonderful getting the right things in place and seeing how to move things forward.
Let's transition a little bit from legislation. And I'd like to talk about your company, the Interaction Advisory Group. And now your background with being an officer here in the state of Alabama and how that helped found and what exactly the Interaction Advisory Group is.
Yeah, IAG, it was a company I co-founded with a business partner of mine, Interaction Advisory Group in 2015. When I was a police officer, we received very little mental health training, much less any developmental disability training. And so we saw that there was a gap there. And me being a police officer and then having a child with a developmental disability, and then also meeting hundreds, if not thousands of families from that point, from the advocacy that has taken place, knowing that there was a training gap for law enforcement in specifics, but really first responders on how are the best ways to interact with people with developmental disabilities. Excuse me. So we founded that company because I speak the language of law enforcement, and I like to think I speak some of the language of the disability community and developmental disability community. So we're really trying to bridge the gap on understanding. One of the largest groups is autism, but it's not just about autism. It's about a lot of developmental disabilities, to make sure that if they come in contact with law enforcement or other first responders, that there's going to be the best possible outcome that we can have. And that goes along, that's from safety for the first responder and the individual, but also fair treatment of that individual as well.
You hear, worst case scenario stories sometimes pop up in the news where the caregiver is saying, hey, this person needs help. And the police officers or the first responders are very unsure how to do that. And when I see or hear about those, I feel like all parties involved are just kind of like, I'm not sure what's going on here, and I want to control the situation as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's this is not really pointing at law enforcement. Law enforcement has got a very difficult job. The way we look at things is they may not have the information to help the developmental disability community out when they need help, or when they're having to, if they pull a car over, or if they're at their house. We just want to give them the tools and the information on what path can we take that's safer and better for the person with developmental disability, but also for the officer. And a lot of times the officers just haven't been trained in that. And that's really what we're about, is giving them the knowledge for the understanding. And I'm a believer that if we can train them in that, and teach them that, we're really raising the level of awareness and acceptance in our society, I feel, through our training, because our training is not a textbook training. We give practical examples, and the curriculum is what it is. But I bring in the empathy piece of understanding what families go through, understanding what people with developmental disabilities may go through, and try to help them understand, some of these things. So if they do come in contact with them, they kind of have that understanding as well, and kind of understanding what, kind of what some people may be going through. Not everybody goes through the same thing, but just having that level of understanding and the knowledge. A lot of times police don't have the knowledge. And I think training is needed in that aspect. Obviously, that's why we started the company. And we hope that officers, after they take our class, have that understanding to have better outcomes, have the best possible outcome. It's really just looking at taking a different path and getting to the end as they may get to it. But we just want people to be kept safe and treated fairly. And I believe the officers and the first responders that take our class, I think, are, a lot of them have their eyes open about, didn't really know this. And that is always wonderful, that we train some stuff that people may not have heard in the past. That's always important. But truly trying to get better outcomes, or training for the best possible outcome for not just the officer, but for the individual as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the understanding part of it, and that's no fault to the officer. They just haven't been given the knowledge a lot of the times.
It's awesome that you guys go in and you focus on the information that the officer needs to be able to do that type of assessment in the field. But then, like, it's like a 1-2 punch. During that process, they're having empathy, and they're gaining empathy for the disability community. So it's like the benefit to them and from doing the service is like an iceberg. I'm sure there's some type of certificate there where they've been through the training, but I'm sure a lot of what comes out of that training is not necessarily seen on the surface right away, but carries through with them when they go home to their family and how they interact with people with special needs and disability in the future. I have a question for you. There's been some talk about sending out social workers to a number of calls that have come in. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not totally against that. It'd be just depending upon how that is written and what the policies would be there. I think a lot of times police officers are put in lose situations. We've got to put them in better situations as far as knowledge. Police officers are not psychologists a lot of the times, and so if it's a situation where a social worker or whatever the individual would ride along with the police officer. A police officer, their job is for law enforcement, is to enforce laws. It's not a lot of times going on some of these calls they're going on. They either are not equipped for it, or they haven't been trained on it, and maybe a social worker has. But I still believe a police officer needs to be involved in most calls. Do I think they have to take the lead on every call? Possibly not. But do they have to enforce the laws that are on the books? I mean, that's their job. But I think there's room for maybe some improvement, or not improvement, but room for something like that. But I would like to see it more of a team effort. The law enforcement officer is involved. Maybe they make a report and everything that needs to be done on that for paperwork purposes. But the other person, whoever that might be, is the one that's really managing the case and doing the follow-up that is much needed. A lot of times police officers do what they can do. And they're doing other things, and there needs to really be good follow-up with those families or those individuals, and maybe that other organization can respond with them, then do the follow-up. I feel, and I've talked to a lot of officers many different times, and sometimes officers are just not equipped with knowledge or the tools or resources that they need. And if there's another organization or somebody that can ride along with them and have those kind of things, but I'm a believer the police officer still needs to be involved. They still need to enforce laws the way that they need to. But if there is a better way to answer certain calls, I'm not saying for every call, don't misunderstand, but for certain calls, if there is a better way to do that, to take the burden of responsibility off an officer that may not be trained for that and put it on somebody that is trained for that, they can be there for the law enforcement purposes. I think there's some things that can be talked with that. And I challenge all police departments. Police have a tough job and it's very difficult. I've been there. And I challenge police departments to just look at policy too, really for people with disabilities and mental health, of course, but also people with developmental disabilities. Is there policy on the books that address how you have those interactions? And if there's not, then, create a team or a policy development team to have well-developed policy on how people interact and what their policy is going to be on the books.
Yeah, that is asking a lot from the officers. Excuse me, to be able to take care of every situation almost 100% perfect. I want to acknowledge Kim Spangler. She says, how can the general public help re-awareness of the work that the Interaction Advisory Group does and help connect the community to it?
All right, making sure I understand the question. How can the community make sure they know what Interaction Advisory Group does?
Yeah, and spread the word.
Spreading the word, it's really just contacting. I mean, listen, we do trainings all the time. We do them virtually. We're trying to slowly, hopefully, you get back to in-person trainings. It's really going to your local police department, you could go to local city leaders and just letting them know our training is there, sharing the website that we have. We've got a lot of good resources on our resource page on our website, but they can go read about the training that we do. Our email, our contact numbers are on there, and then they can call us and reach out. I think it is important though that if you live in a community that you think the police need the training, they may not know about the training that's out there. So going and talking to them, sending them an email or a phone call, and giving them our website. They can learn a lot from the website on what our training is and what the course objectives are. And then obviously if they have questions, they're always happy to call me and we can discuss it. So it's really just reaching out to them and letting them know that the training is out there. And then we usually, if I can talk to them and explain really how, what our training is and what my background is and really what our objectives are. Our number one objective is first responder and citizen safety. That's why we do it, is safety for everybody involved. And then we've obviously got references too that are on our website and what people have thought about our class. So really just introducing them to the website and tell them to reach out to me, or just making that connection or an email introduction if that's the case.
I think that introduction would be awesome. Either, an email or just a phone call. Say, hey, Dustin Chandler, Interaction Advisory Group. I'd like to, to reach out to him and you can learn more. And we'll go ahead and put the website in the chat here after we get done. I would like to highlight your Interaction Advisory Group has been doing amazing things here in Alabama, but you guys have done some really cool things starting outside of Alabama. If you could kind of highlight that and some of the success in growing.
Yeah, listen, we've been very fortunate. The Developmental Disability Council has been very good to us in Alabama. That's how we're funded through the state of Alabama. And that's something for Ms. Spangler that, you can tell these departments, the training is funded. So you're not going to the police department or the sheriff's office or the agency or fire department and asking for money. You're just saying, hey, this training is funded, and that's how it's funded. And we have been very fortunate and blessed to start this same project in Louisiana. And we look at it as being a success already. We have got, we're booked up 3 months out for the trainings in Louisiana. We're doing everything virtually now. We may do a couple in-person things when things get settled down with the pandemic. But we've been very fortunate. So it was very exciting for us to be able to branch out to Louisiana and be well received there and have a warm welcome over there. And it's important, I think it should be an objective of every state to have this training, but it is encouraging to know that there's another state that looks at this as equally as important, and the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council out there sees that as equally important. And I like to say that, Alabama's DD Council and their push for this the attention and the push for this type of training here really led to another state picking it up. And it's nice knowing that Alabama, my home state, kind of led the way in that. And we're very fortunate and really to be able to do that. And I want people to understand too, we use self-advocates in our trainings, and we pay them for their time. We think it's very important for self-advocates to be a part of our training, to share experiences that they live with autism or another developmental disability or whatever it might be. We want them to share that with police officers and first responders. They're a very intricate part of our training to enrich that and enrich the training experience. I can talk about it all day long and they'll understand it. But when it comes from self-advocates giving that personal experience or that personal touch to that, it really hammers what we're teaching home. And they're a very important part of the process and a part of the training.
Now, do you guys have openings for self-advocates in your training?
We're always, if anybody's ever interested, they can send an email to me. You can put my email in the chat. I believe you have that. They can always send an email to us. We like to talk to the self-advocates, or if it's somebody that a parent wants to get involved with the self-advocate, we'll talk to them and make sure we're on the same page of kind of how our training works and kind of what we expect from a self-advocate. But we're always looking for new self-advocates. I hope it helps, empowers them that if they can do this in front of a first responder community and everything, that they can go off and do great things in front of a lot of different people. And that's what we want to foster. And that's what we want to encourage is, listen, come out and do this with us, and we will help you the best as we can. Obviously we pay for that. So they're not doing this for free, that we'll pay them. But then after that, I hope it encourages them to go and speak in front of groups and do more self-advocacy and let people know that they're there and that they have what they want to say, they want to be heard. But then it's also about employment as well, that, don't be, if you can do this with us and you can do the other things, then don't be scared to go out there and go for it. And we hope hope it empowers them past that.
And I love that you guys have self-advocates in the training, because that's kind of practice what you preach of having them there at the table, helping the officers and the first responders learn that. So that's just amazing that you guys are doing that. I would like to transition very briefly. We're not going to go too far into it, but as I understand, you are on the board of an organization, Caroline's Carts.
Well, okay, so I'm actually on the board of Caroline's Cause. That is Miss Drew Ann Long. She started Caroline's Cart, was a great thing that she did for the grocery carts and everything of certain establishments really across the country. I sit on a board of directors for Caroline's Cause. Same Caroline, it's her daughter Caroline. And Caroline's Cause, I think it's very important. I think it's a great cause to be a part of that is awarding scholarships to students that have a special needs sibling. So it's for the actual sibling of a special needs sibling, so to speak, if that makes sense. We want to encourage them. Obviously, go to carolinescause.com and they can sign up. There are some criteria that you need to meet to be able to qualify for a scholarship. But we know siblings are a very important part of a person, individual with disabilities or life, and they go through a lot, like we talked about a little bit earlier. And I think this is just a good cause to let them know that, listen, you've got support out here for post-secondary education. And again, there's criteria to meet. You can go to carolinescause.com to read about it and see. And if you do fit the criteria, please apply because those are going to be awarded very soon.
So for anybody that has a son or a daughter that is a sibling and is kind of aging out of the high school and going into post-secondary education, now do you have to be a senior for this, or you can still be a junior and get it in another year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, I think you have to be a senior about to graduate. There's other criteria that has to be met. So the best thing to do is to go to the website and really read all the criteria. And if you do meet it, or you're very close to meeting it, I should say, please apply for it and just apply and see. And obviously those are looked at very carefully by the board and the decision makers for that. And we just want to be a little bit of help to those families out there.
Yeah, that's amazing work that you guys do. And then the last one I want to kind of touch on is the work that you've been doing on your Facebook page. Now, I know that you're very fluent, very great speaker, and you are starting to do, or you've been doing live broadcast on your Facebook page, Off the Cuff. If you could give us a little bit of your broadcasting history and how that's come about to Off the Cuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it's too much broadcasting. It's really just kind of doing stuff, but I guess it falls under broadcasting. It's when Carly's Law got started, I was asked to come on radio. It was on the AM side of things with Matt Murphy. He's a good friend of mine now through that, and I've been asked to come on the radio several times in the last several years, and then he asked me to host some shows when he couldn't or somebody couldn't, and I would just fill in. I'll be co-hosting with Valerie Vining on 99.5 FM on Monday morning, this upcoming Monday from 6 to 10, just filling in for them. And it's really, in case you couldn't tell, I like to talk. And so I just really took that idea of talking, and I'm better. It's called Off the Cuff because I don't really use notes for anything. I really just speak from the heart most of the time. And so I just started on Facebook and where I could to just start talking about issues or sharing stories of other people, and really doing it that way. And it really came from the love of really being on radio, just filling in from time to time. But then started Off the Cuff. So there's an Off the Cuff with Dustin Chandler Facebook page. And then I'll do it on my own personal page, Dustin Chandler, as well, just to get it out there. It's just something I feel, if there's a topic I want to talk about or share experiences, that's where I'll go to share them some of the times. But then we like to share stories and do some book reviews that we've done in the past for that, and then talk about current issues as well. So it really came from radio. I blame Matt Murphy for that. And now it's just something come over to that. So yeah, just kind of check that out from time to time. And I encourage anybody, man, send me a friend request on Facebook. I friend everybody, man. We're all friends, and there's a lot of good stories to share out there. And if anybody wants to share their story on any topic, it doesn't have to be just these topics. It could be different things. Just friend me on Facebook or send me an email or something, and I'd love to hear about it.
And I've heard you on 99.5 before. I think it was must have been a year ago, maybe. But I remember hearing about it. I got to know of you through ACDD, and then I think you were saying it somewhere, or somebody was saying 99.5, and then I heard you on 99.5, and I'm like, oh, this guy's awesome. And we're going to put Off the Cuff in the link, and then I'm also going to tag you on this post so that people can friend request you there. If you could give some examples of guests that are on Off the Cuff.
We've had Scott Stannis on with us. He's a political cartoonist. His brother actually died from SUDEP a long time ago in the 80s. We got his story. I've brought Matt Murphy on there. He's always fun to talk to. We've had can't think of a lot of their names now. Pastor Saul. Yeah, we've had Scott Sauls on there. He's an author of a book called. I encourage everybody to read the book. It's called Us Versus Them, I believe. It's A Gentle Answer is the name of the book. It really gives good perspective on getting away from an us versus them culture. A lot of times it's a great book. We've had Scott Sauls on. We had Dr. Slavarsky on talking about medical cannabis on stuff like that. We also had Dr. Sag was on most recently talking about COVID-19 and the vaccines and what was really neat to know about that. So we try to cover, I try to cover a lot of different things. And I'm going to have some on that are talking about some nonprofit work that they do. We're going to have a gentleman on. I've got to get with him talking about how he does a lot of work with folks suffering from PTSD that I think is very important just to get his story out. So we've had those kind of guests, and it's something I do for fun and just try to help get people's, get their story out there and get their calls out there.
Yeah, so it is a little bit of a broader range, but you have quite a bit of disability content on there. So I would highly recommend anybody that is, looking for disability content to please follow Off the Cuff. Once again, we'll put it in the chat here, and we're hoping, and we've talked before about Mr. Chandler doing a few broadcasts on Alabama Care over the next few months on topics that he would like to share with you guys and content there. So we are extremely looking forward to that. And as we kind of close here today, I want to thank you, Mr. Chandler, for being with us. But is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to say to individuals or their family members that you think they could really take something with?
Well, and I appreciate the kind words, man. The pleasure was mine. It's an honor to be on here to just share a little bit of my story. What I would just like to share to parents and individuals is stay strong and know people care about you. I'm a believer that love wins, and we need love for each other. And it doesn't matter what walk of life or anything that I love you. I always say that in a lot of my training classes. I know it may sound a little cheesy to some people, but I think love wins in the end. And I'm a believer in Christ, and that's where I found a lot of my hope is in Jesus Christ. And so, love wins, and treat everybody with respect, and know that the families out there and individuals, there are people fighting for you. Of course, that there's several of them out there fighting, and just know that you're loved, and know that if you're going through struggles, there are other people going through struggles as well. And I'm always open to be a person to talk to, just to listen, and just know that you're loved. And there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, and then we hope get addressed pretty soon. So, and we're all a team in this. We're all in this together, and just keep up the good fight.
Very well put, sir. And like I said, I can put your email in the chat there. So if anybody would like to reach out to Mr. Chandler, please go ahead and do that. Also, you can reach out to him through the number on his business page, Interaction Advisory website, and take it from there. So once again, I'd like to thank you. And guys, please join back in next month for when Mr. Chandler is an anchor on Alabama Care, and we'll have his own guest on here. And I'm looking forward to that. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and end the broadcast, and we'll go ahead and kind of wave goodbye here.